Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.
Agenda has passed. Do I hear a motion?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. Comments from the public? Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
I consent except for the 3 issues concerning the terrorism task force. I'll abstain from those until we have a presentation on that. Thank you.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes. Okay, moving to immediately, let's take on the Board of Supervisors approval of the 2022 Board Standing Committee appointments. And under these items, there are 2 committees that I would like to modify with the approval of the supervisors, where Seth would remain on the Peachtree Healthcare, and Seth would move to the alternate under first 5, if that's appropriate for both the supervisors, if you agree.
Yes.
That would be fine with me. I also have a time conflict. The food bank meets also at that time.
And under which item is that? Is that going to be a conflict with which department?
They're the same too. All 3 of them had the meetings at the same date and time.
Okay, with the food bank.
But I'm sure it's something we can work out later.
I'm sorry?
We can work it out later.
Okay, that'll work. Having said that, any comment from the board? Comment from the public? Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I will second.
I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes, with the caveat of more juggling to happen.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes. Okay, thank you. To special presentations this morning. We'll receive a special presentation from the Camptonville Community Partnership regarding All Children Thrive grant from the California Department of Public Health and the results of the related transportation study. I believe we have the Camptonville Community Partners.
Hi, and thank you for your time this morning. My name is Kathy LeBlanc. I'm the Executive Director of Camptonville Community Partnership. Camptonville Community Partnership is a local nonprofit. Our mission is rural people working together for a safe, sustainable, and healthy community. Kasarian Ingera, one would always say to another, and it means, how are the children? It is still the traditional greeting among the Maasai, acknowledging the high value that the Maasai always place on their children's well-being. All the children are well means that life is good. Yuba, All Children Thrive, or ACT, has the same question. How are the children? Yuba, All Children Thrive members, please stand up. We began meeting in June. We are some of the Yuba County ACT team, folks who live, work, or attend school in Dobbins and Challenge. These communities were accepted as California's lone frontier rural effort in the All Children Thrive statewide initiative. All the rest are cities. Please sit. CCP has been representing the foothill communities for about 20 years. Recently, through this All Children Thrive grant with California Public Health and the California Department of Public Health, CCP signed a contract to build foothill community and capacity. This effort is supported by the Yuba County Wellness and Child Abuse Prevention Council and the Prevention Network, or as it's better known, the Yuba Children's Council. Some members of the Children's Council are here today. They include former chair, First Five Director, Erica Summers, also Health and Human Service Deputy Director, Tony Gordon, and YCOE Prevention Services Coordinator, Amy Molina Jones. They are here to acknowledge their involvement and show support for All Children Thrive Yuba. In June of 2021, through a Thrive survey, transportation was identified as the key concern. Transportation is the vital missing link because no matter what assets a community can bring to the table for their benefit, you have to be able to get there. Why Dobbins? Why challenge? Because these once thriving foothill communities are on the brink of oblivion, and the folks that live, work, and play there care. It doesn't help that their concerns are almost invisible in state and county data because these communities' facts and figures are aggregated with their other more thriving next door neighbors. What info you can obtain is either Brownsville Challenge or Oregon House Dobbins combined data, leaning heavily on the more populated Brownsville and Oregon House. Challenge and Dobbins' true concerns can go unnoticed unless you take the time to ask. Today, LSC and All Children Thrive are presenting our transportation study results and recommendations. Highlighted are challenges and potential opportunities to transportation faced by the communities of Challenge and Dobbins. In the coming months, ACT will dig deeper and champion the most likely remedies. Please let me introduce Selena McKinney of LSC, who will present her findings.
Thank you, Kathy, for that introduction. I'm Selena McKinney with LSC Transportation Consultants. And some of the months back, Kathy contacted me with concern for her community on how they could move forward with their mobility challenges. As she mentioned, that's something they identified as the most important concern for moving forward in their communities, specifically Dobbins and Challenge. So I started digging into the existing conditions of the communities and trying to identify what their mobility issues were and some strategies for those. This is not going forward. Sorry. So this paper describes the existing conditions in the communities and it identifies some mobility challenges. One thing we looked at immediately was the demographics of the area. And as Kathy mentioned, a lot of the area is lumped together, so it's really hard to identify what's what there, but it does show us some trends of what's been going on in the area in the last few years. And you can see there's a very big decrease in the population, particularly in Dobbins, the reduction of youth. Some of the community lives off-grid, however, or they're not counted, so that's an important factor as well. But Dobbins, the Dobbins data was more identifying the Dobbins. The Challenge Brownsville identified more of the Brownsville area. But you can see that the poverty level is very high. There are a lot of households without vehicles, which was a big concern for this study. And it identifies that within Challenge, there's a big decrease, or excuse me, there's a big decrease of seniors in Dobbins as well. So the mobility patterns for the area, people try to get to places like Yuba City for shopping and errands, personal errands, but they have to go as far as Roseville and Auburn for medical concerns. So we have to find out how they can get there. We looked at the school enrollment and how people are getting to schools. We don't have data on the homeschooled, but there is believed to be quite a few numbers of homeschooled in the area. But there are about 300 students enrolled locally. About half of them take the public school bus, and the other half are driven or in a handful in carpools, but almost nobody walks. The conditions for walking are very poor in the area, and that's something that this study would like to address. We looked at the roadway system, and as you can see, there are very few major roads. It's mostly minor roads and a lot of arterial roads, and the conditions on those roads are pretty rough in a lot of instances. The bike network, we looked at the bike plan from 10 years ago. It hasn't been updated for 10 years, but it did show the existing bike system and some planned bikeways. And though that was 10 years ago, those have not been implemented, and there's nothing right in Dobbins or Challenge, but just over in Brownsville. We looked at the infrastructure for pedestrians, and they're very much lacking. You can see there's a bit of a pathway in front of the Challenge store, which is closed. But you know, if we could build the community back up, there is potential for that to be a little bit of a pathway and a gathering way. There is some pedestrian access around the Dobbins Elementary School, and that could be improved. And then we're showing the bridge there. There's infrastructure that crosses the Marysville Road there, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So we really need more connectivity within the community for pedestrian facilities. In terms of transportation, Yuba-Sutter Transit does have the Foothills route, which goes up to Oregon House and Brownsville, but it does not go to Dobbins or Challenge. The ridership has dropped significantly with COVID. It was dropping anyway, and the performance, the target performance is to have at least 2 passengers an hour. Right now it's down to 1. So, but we're thinking that if there's service, it's only 2 days or 3 days a week. If it could be provided 5 days a week and actually get somebody to Marysville for work, then that might be something that could boost the local ridership. But that's something that we could look at and talk about with Yuba-Sutter. If we can get more people to use the transit system, they might be more interested in improving what's offered. We looked at the relevant studies that are affecting the planning up there, and that includes the Yuba County Transportation Plan, which focuses on road construction. There's been some local road construction. That's a great opportunity to also try to improve the shoulders for better walking and pedestrian or biking. We looked at the county general plan, the bikeway master plan, and the ADA transition plan, and considered all those in moving forward. We also looked at crash data. There is a lot of high-speed accidents and missed turns in the Challenge and Dobbins area, so there is concern for safety in those areas. And again, some of the mobility challenges. Here we're showing a crosswalk that crosses and goes straight into the bushes. This shows the ditches that are there on the roadsides. They're very steep. You can see somebody's made their little path into the red dirt on the hillside. So it's challenging to try to have pedestrian access or bicycle access, and yet the shoulders are actually, the right-of-way is quite wide, but the challenge is getting it built out. So some of the mobility strategies that we talked about are to coordinate with the Yuba County Department of Public Works, and when they do their road widening and their overlay projects, to find out if there's any way they can widen those shoulders, give us 3 feet on the side to improve access for mobility or for bicycles and pedestrians. We looked at, we talked about having, school groups or clubs work on developing their own little paths from the schools to nearby areas to at least encourage some local walking. It improves, kids getting out and walking, doing a walking school bus. Those types of activities are very beneficial for the community to get people out walking. Within Dobbins, the area around the school, there's already that nice little pedestrian bridge on the side of that, on the left side there of the bottom right picture, that crosses the creek. And there's a crosswalk on one side, but not on the side that goes from the school over there. So improve that little area, improve the pathway towards the post office. And that if you keep going beyond that direction, there's the mobile home park, and that would be a good opportunity to create a walking path for people who live in the mobile home park. Again, with challenge, build some little pathways from the school up into the community. There's also a pathway behind the Forest Service Center, which is closed now, so I'm not sure how well that will work for developing the path, but that's a potential. There's signage there. Develop that path so that people can walk to the school into the town. So at least they have a portion of their trip as a walking trip. But probably the most important part for developing access is for developing public transit in some form or another. And that looks like either working with Yuba County or Yuba-Sutter to improve the trips up there, either expand the days of week that they are provided or extend them to Challenge and Dobbins so that people have better access, or develop a small little shuttle up in that area so that they can bring people to the buses. So those are all things that we looked at and talked about, and they'll be further exploring in the area. The other thing we talked about is a volunteer driver program. They have a very informal one. You've probably heard of the Hilltop Gang, and they've done some informal volunteer driving programs to get people down here. But if we could formalize that so that it's available to more people, more advertised, that's a good way to get somebody from a rural community into where they need services. So the paper talks about a lot of other programs, volunteer driver programs, and how they have worked. And the biggest thing for a volunteer driver program is you really need to start with advocacy. And this is a very, as Kathy mentioned, it's a frontier community. They're used to being advocates for themselves. And so I think that they have a good start there. So that's kind of an overview of the mobility paper. You guys have any questions or comments?
Questions from the board?
Through the chair. Having lived in that area from 61 to 63, the main reason for Challenge and other towns in there and people being able to survive up there was the sawmill. What efforts has the community done to try and revive some of the sawmills in that area? Because I think before you can actually spend money up there, you need to have some place that people have jobs, and there's a real need for sawmills in that we import a lot of our lumber. But I lived in Strawberry Valley and Woodleaf when it was a sawmill, and it was a thriving community, but because of the sawmill, that was the only employment, that in the woods. And what chances do we have of reviving any of that industry? Because you're
I will
asking
say-
for a major investment in an area that is, it's kind of like Calico in Southern California. When mines shut down, the services stop, and I'm not too sure we can afford to provide city services up there.
A couple quick things on that. I wouldn't say there's city services. We know that there'll be a lower level of service, but also there has been some newer investment in the recent years, and there's some plans that I'll let Kathy talk about. So go ahead, Kathy.
Yeah, hi, Andy. We're building the Forest Biomass Business Center there. That is an opportunity to turn forest biomass, small dimensional lumber, stuff that would normally be thrown in a big burn pile, turn that into jobs and energy. So that's a project that has been going on for quite a while. We are hoping to break ground this year. Alongside that, there will be a business campus to allow entrepreneurs, folks who have ideas about different types of jobs. It's a combined heat and power facility, so we could also provide heat to these business campuses, potential businesses, and heat can be turned into refrigeration. So there's a great opportunity beyond work in the woods. There's opportunity for greenhouses. There's food greenhouses. There's an opportunity for a food hub. There's an opportunity for a lot of different business, and we are deeply going into that. I did want to finish up with just a little bit about this transportation study and what the community is doing, if that's okay with you, Andy.
I just, I don't have any say in it. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. In October, the ACT Community Vision was developed. Dobbins and Challenge are thriving rural communities where people respect and preserve local history and values, nurturing and honoring family, the elderly, and the environment. It's a rural place to call home, where everyone is valued. The community came together to put that vision statement to help us move forward. The definition of a frontier town is that it consists of a sparsely populated area that is geographically isolated from population centers and services. Yuba Act is a statewide pilot for frontier rural community building and civic engagement. As such, we have been invited by the state to continue this effort through 2022 with what we are calling the second act. As the Yuba County Act team, we will continue examining the key concerns of these two communities. We hope to be back before you later this year, and in the meantime, we invite you to monitor and support our progress. Also of note, CCP has the only FRC, Family Resource Center, in the whole Yuba foothills. Opening and sustaining another Family Resource Center has been a primary goal of the Yuba County Family Resource Center network. In Challenge, it will be an ACT priority. Initial steps include Debbie Reynoso, who's here today, and her family. They have purchased a building to house the FRC. The second act will help us to open the doors with funding for community staff through 2022. It will be looking to encourage an FRC in Dobbins as well. We plan to work with the Children's Council and other partners to continue to build capacity. With this FRC in Challenge, we will be able to better respond to the question, how are the children? Thank you. Didn't know if you had more comments.
So, Kathy, I do have a comment. I'll tell you, with your leadership, with your volunteers, with the community, I really appreciate you bringing this to the attention of the board and the public. A lot of good things could happen up there. It requires some strategic planning. Nothing's going to happen tomorrow, but with the right planning, it can happen, and things can make a difference in the foothills. Let me encourage you to reach out to Mike Lee. And I don't mean to put Mike on the spot, but at this point, if Mike and myself and maybe another board member could meet on an occasional basis to see what's happening, what are the potentials that could happen. Again, there's never enough money. It just takes some planning to to start that process. If you don't start, I'll guarantee you, nothing will ever get done. So it's worthwhile. I think you have a great report. I think you have some really interesting ideas. And wherever we can utilize those as we do regular maintenance, plan for grants for the future of Yuba County and the foothills, it all makes sense. So between the two of you, if you'll make contact and let me know, I'd be glad to be involved with that as well.
Thank you, Randy. There was one other opportunity that came up. PG&E is looking at undergrounding a lot of their cables.
Yes.
Undergrounding has to be done alongside roadways. It's a perfect opportunity to widen that road and make PG&E pay the price tag. So that is an opportunity as well we can discuss. Thank you very much. Thank you all. I appreciate being for you today.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Kathy, one of the things that we've done is we've put in motion a biomass plant. That is going to be the key to the foothills and starting to revitalize that with the biomass plant. So you have to have something up there that creates jobs, paying jobs. And if you could find out if anybody is looking to expand a sawmill up there. I know Dobbins has a small sawmill, and the board might be interested in what the future of employment up there is, because there's a big call for lumber.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andy.
Thank you.
Very good. Thanks, Kathy.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to public comment.
Any person may speak about any subject of concern, provided it is within the jurisdiction of the Board of Supervisors and is not already on today's agenda. The total amount of time allotted for receiving such public communication should be limited to a total of 15 minutes, and each individual or group will be limited to no more than 3 minutes. Prior to this time, speakers are requested to fill out a request to speak card and submit it to the clerk of the Board of Supervisors. If you are participating via Zoom and wish to comment, please use the raise hand function or *9 if participating on the phone. Please note, no board actions can be taken on comments read under this heading. And I do not have any filled out requests, and it doesn't appear that there are any on Zoom.
Very good. Moving forward, under county departments, 697-2021, Board of Supervisors recommend nomination for 2 representatives and an alternate to the Feather River Air Quality Management District Board of Directors for 2022.
Through the chair, I'd like to nominate Randy Fletcher. I think or don't we have 2?
Yes.
Okay, so nominate Randy Fletcher as the main and Don Blazer as the alternate. Is that
And attached to that would be a alternate. And from last year, Seth was on the board, but we alternate the number of members each year. This year, we're 2 on the board rather than 3. So if Seth is agreeable, he'll maintain as the alternate.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Any comment from the public?
If I could, just to make sure we're clear on the motion. So 2 primaries, 1 alternate. So which 2 board members are the primary and which would be the alternate?
Randy Fletcher, Supervisor Randy Fletcher, and Don Blazer would be the 2 primaries.
The primaries.
I just wanted to make sure it was clear on the motion.
Very good.
That was the intention of what I seconded. So.
Very good. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Agreed.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Thank you, that's unanimous.
Thank you. And item number 677-2021, we're going to pull that from the agenda. Item number 679-2021, Community Development and Services Award Contract to apparent lowest responsive and responsible bidder Frank Webb Construction for the Public Works Loma Rica Maintenance Yard Project for 2021/8092.
Well, good morning,
Good morning.
Supervisor Fletcher, members of the board. I'm Dan Peterson, Director of Public Works. This is an exciting project for us. As I'm sure you know, the Loma Rica Corporation Yard is in horrible shape. It should have been bulldozed years ago. The septic system is pretty much non-functional. The building doesn't suffice for our needs up there. So after a few years of scraping up money and saving money and coming up with a design, we're actually ready to award a contract to go to construction for the new Loma Rica yard. So we're asking the board to award the contract to the apparent lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Frank Webb Construction, for the new Loma Rica maintenance yard at Fruitland Road, and authorize the chair to execute the contract.
Questions from the board? Comments from the board? Short comment on my part. I appreciate it. I think the public appreciate it. I think the upper foothills would appreciate it. A lot of need for repair up there. It's been very apparent over the last few years. So I think it's very reasonable. Any comment from the public?
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank
Thank you. So item number 673, 2021, Community Development Services Award Contract to the apparent lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Gino Construction, for Public Works Airport Maintenance Yard Project 2021-8031 at 4667 Skyway Drive.
Well, good morning once again. This may sound like a repeat of our last agenda item. This is the Valley Corporation Yard. This is where our main equipment repair shop is located, our sign shop is located, and it's our primary storage area for equipment and materials. Currently, we have a World War II era building that no longer meets our needs. As you can imagine, our equipment becomes larger and more sophisticated as time goes on. The equipment that we have at this building and the size and the layout of the existing building simply are no longer adequate for what we do. So for this reason, once again, we've been saving our money. We came up with a design, worked with our maintenance staff to come up with a building that does meet their needs. And we are now asking the board to award the contract to the apparent lowest responsive and responsible bidder, Gino Construction, for the maintenance yard at Skyway Drive, and authorize the chair to execute the contract.
Questions from the board?
Through the chair, we added verbiage to both items that was not there before. Lowest responsive and responsible bidder. Can you clarify why we don't just give it to the lowest bidder?
Well, under the state procurement regulations, we have two different criteria we have to meet before we can award a contract. Number one is that the contractor has to be what's deemed as responsible. So they have to have their valid contractor's license. They have to have their insurance up to date. They cannot be on any list from the state of California for non-performance on prior projects. And then that's responsible. Then there's responsive, which means that they are required to submit a full and accurate bid for the project. So not that it's a common practice anymore, but when I was a young man, I used to see this a lot. My father was a contractor, and there were certain contractors that made a living off of submitting vague, incomplete bids, and then after the fact arguing whether or not they should be deemed the low bidder. So that's why there are very strict regulations now that say in order to be a responsible bidder, you have to accurately and completely fill out your bid at the time that you submit it. So those are the two terms.
Thank you. I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Any comments from the public? I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes,
Thank you, that's unanimous.
thank you.
If I could, through the chair, before we go on to the next item, item 677, which was pulled at the request of the department. The request was due to a staff person not being available to present. That staff person actually is here able to present. So if the board is okay with that, or the chair is okay with it, that item can be presented today.
That'd be fine. If we have a presenter, let's take advantage while they're here. So this is item number 677, Health and Human Services adopt resolution authorizing the Director of Health and Human Services to apply for funds provided by the California Department of Public Works, Office of Oral Health, and execute grant application.
Good morning, Chair.
Good morning.
Other members of the board. I'm Irma Thurman, Deputy Director at Health and Human Services. The state of California has made grant funds available through the California Department of Public Health, Office of Oral Health, to promote effective oral health practices among parents, child care providers, primary health care providers, other programs, and referral services to Health and Human Services for prenatal care and follow-up services for children with developmental concerns and hospital rounds with new mothers to provide education and support. There's a need for robust health care and education within Yuba County. Following the development of the 2019 Community Oral Health Survey conducted by Health and Human Services staff through the Oral Health Grant, several deficiencies were identified as they relate to the oral health of youth in Yuba County. According to HHS, Health and Human Services, fluoride binage data collected between 2012 and 2018, the annual average of children with a dental classification of 2, 3, or 4 was overall 43%, and dental classifications are determined by urgency of treatment needs. Class 1 generally means there's no visible dental problems. Class 2 means there's the beginning of dental decay. Class 3, there's urgent dental problems. And Class 4, there's emergent dental problems, usually acute injury, oral infection, or other painful conditions. From that Health and Human Services survey, 79% of parents reported their children visited the dentist within the last year for routine checkup and cleaning. Yuba County, in addition, Yuba County has a health professional shortage score of 19, classifying it as a health professional shortage area. Yuba County has a rate of dentists per 100,000 of 34.9%, which is much lower than the state average of 80.2% per 100,000 and the national average of 65.6 of 100,000. There are only 2 dental providers in Yuba County which accept dental care, and of those, one provides only pediatric services. I actually think there's 3 now. Ongoing education within Yuba County in coordination with partners like Marysville, Joint Unified School District's Happy Toothmobile, and Wheatland School District's Big Smiles is needed to ensure dental disparities are addressed and the oral health of our youth population is taken care of to avoid future dental issues. It is in the best interest of the County of Yuba to apply for and utilize the grant funds to help ensure that oral health needs are met for pregnant women, children, and adolescents, particularly those who are low-income residents of the county. Yuba County's funding award for the stated period is $164,458 per year, with an anticipated total 5-year funding amount of $822,290. Approval of the board resolution will authorize Health and Human Services to apply for the funds and will authorize the director to execute the resulting grant agreement and other related documents. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the board? Questions from the public? Back to the board.
I'll move to approve.
Second. I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes,
Thank you. That's unanimous.
thank you.
Thank you.
Back on track. Here we are. Item number 17, 2022. Information Technology Approved Professional Services Agreement with Motorola Solutions for Communication Tower Infrastructure Upgrades.
Good morning, board members. I'm Joseph
Morning.
Boats. I'm the IT manager for information technology, head of operations, and your communications lead for Emergency Operations Center. Before you, I have a communications project that I'm looking to get your approval today. It is a refresh of communications radio equipment that services public safety. The current equipment that's in place at 3 tower locations that Yuba County has equipment at: Oregon Peak, Sutter Buttes, and the primary site at the sheriff's facility. The radio equipment repeaters are excess of a decade old. In 2017, Motorola notified its subscribers that the MTR 2000s and Quantar repeaters the county uses are end of life and end of support this for December 31st, 2018. That extension was then granted after there are other public safety entities still utilizing that equipment. So Motorola extended that end of support to December 31st, 2020. So currently we have equipment that is no longer supported and no longer under maintenance, and parts are going to be very hard to come by. And so I worked with Motorola Solutions over the last 8 months to come up with an engineered replacement to address our immediate needs and for a scalable solution that will allow us to grow as our communications needs expand. Last year, Department of Justice added another requirement. October 12, 2020, California Department of Justice required that law enforcement start looking at and implementing encryption for their communications. The current equipment that we have in place does not support encryption. So in order to meet that encryption need, we have to replace all our repeaters. At the 3 sites, the primary site being the sheriff's facility, we have 12 repeaters. Oregon Peak, there are 7. Sutter Buttes, there are 3. Now, while the team's law enforcement centric, because most of the communications do support law enforcement, there are other entities that this project does support. For instance, aside from the sheriff's department and other law enforcement tactical communications repeaters, there is also a local government repeater. And that repeater services animal care services, the ag department, environmental health, public health, and the Office of Emergency Services. In addition to these, we also have another repeater that services public works, and that is also covered under this whole refresh. The funding for this project, $854,184, is funded through Measure K. I'm open for any questions you might have.
Questions from the board?
One question. What do they anticipate as far as support length for the new equipment?
Of the repeater replacements, support maintenance is covered for the first 2 years. On the microwave equipment, we have a multi-year agreement as part of this that'll carry us through 6 years.
Okay, thanks.
Through the chair, I'm going to ask Sheriff Anderson, are there any more, do we have any more gaps in communications areas that you can't reach? And what are we looking to do to provide full coverage as best as can be done in the hills? I know there's, there's areas that you know, you just stop getting communications up in the hills, and it's a little dangerous for the officers.
Yeah, Supervisor Vasquez, thank you. And yeah, so some of those areas in the hills are very challenging indeed. We actually have some pyramid repeaters, which are in-car repeaters that we're going to be rolling out here shortly. Hopefully that will help. We are trying, I think, Joe, and you can jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we're going to try 2 of those to see if that fixes some of the problems that we have in the hills. Quite honestly, you know, since I began working here, we've had issues in several locations in the foothills, and I don't know that, you know, there are some areas that I don't know that we'll ever be able to correct that issue. It has gotten better, and this will certainly help updating some of the repeaters that we have. But, you know, there are areas that just weren't intended for it, and I just don't know the answer. Joe, you could probably speak more intelligently on the matter than I could, but yeah,
Certainly.
to answer your question, there are certainly still areas that we have concerns about, but I don't know what the answer to that might be.
Certainly. A couple of things that we are looking to do to address and increase the communications coverage. There are mobile repeaters that we are going to be putting in to the hill vehicles. They're high-powered UHF with a combination of using 800 megahertz link to the handheld radio, because the department does have multi-band handheld radios. So the connection to the patrol officer with a hand radio would be able to communicate to his car, and then that signal would relay to our infrastructure repeaters. The repeaters that will be in the vehicle increase that power level so that that communication can reach our repeaters. Long term, I'll be working with the Sheriff's Department as well as OES and Public Works and looking at potential down the road, maybe additional tower sites and the opportunity for additional communication repeater sites. But right now, this project, as you see here, does not change the communications footprint. Look at it as you're building, you have a house that's a single story and you have no room to grow except go up. So you got to build a second story. But in order to do that, you have to have a solid foundation. This is what this project does. It gets us on a solid foundation for communications. It allows us then to incorporate additional capabilities as technology advances. We can't do that with our current equipment.
Joe, is there any support for the fire departments through this existing equipment, or does that allow that for the future?
I must have overlooked that. Some of the repeaters that we are replacing addresses the Yuba Fire Command repeaters, the control station at the sheriff's office, as well as the repeater up in Oregon Peak.
Great, appreciate that. Any questions from the public?
Ms. Donna Welberg, please come up to the microphone.
No. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
I just want to make a comment. It's just really hard to believe how fast things move. You know, you just get the agenda on Friday, and there's all these big issues that come. You have such a brief period of time to review it, and there's so many attachments, and and then a weekend takes away a couple of business days that you can't maybe call and ask questions to certain businesses. So it makes it really difficult. It makes me wonder if, does anyone really know what they're voting on or agreeing to? It's concerning to me. And, I don't know enough to even really speak on this particular issue. But there's a great big concern out there right now about 5G and microwaves and, the harm that it's doing to human life. And I heard him mention the word microwave, which, put my antenna up, and that's why I'm up here right now. So my question is, have you really had time to look into what it is he's proposing? And is a microwave, is there any kind of study that may need to be done to see if this is safe for them to install or increase some microwave component of this? And might it make sense to have a study done to see if there's a safer alternative? I know in Sutter County, or maybe it was the city of Yuba City, I'm not quite sure, I wasn't there, but they voted against 5G resolution and chose, I think, to go with fiber optic, which provided the same solution, only it was less intrusive, less harmful. So bottom line, I don't know what I'm talking about. He probably knows what he's talking about. I don't know if you guys really know enough to make an informed decision right here. What I'm learning in this whole process, this is all new to me. I've never been that involved. I've been asleep at the wheel for years. I don't even really have a good handle on how our government works. Okay, I'm learning as I go. But what I am learning is it seems to me that most of our government is being run by unelected unelected parties, people behind the scenes that are, getting the information and researching it, and then they're making recommendations to you, and then, you have such a short time to consider it. And in large part, from what I've seen, you just approve it based on the recommendation that's made. And I think it's dangerous. I think there should be a longer period of time between the time the agenda comes out and the Board of Supervisors meeting, so that not only you, but also the public has an opportunity to really thoroughly look at what it is that's being presented and to see if there are other alternatives, so that we can kick this around and make the best decision. But the way things are happening here just does not make a lot of sense. It's dangerous. I think there's probably a lot of bad decisions that are being made without being well informed. And I know that's not a topic for today, but I might want to put something on the agenda, to maybe a resolution, to try to change the way this is right now. This is just not enough time. But what I'm saying, when you hear the word microwave, we all know the harm that does. I hope it raised a red flag for you a little bit, maybe, and enough to say, why don't we take a minute? Let's table this one. Let's look into it. So we really know what it is we're agreeing to, and we can make a fully informed and safe decision. That's all I'm asking.
Great, thank you. Just a follow up on that. The communications that we're using do not even come near the 5G spectrum. So it's outside that cellular communication network.
Thank you.
So the systems that we have in place and the communication links, we've been safely using them since 2017.
Okay, now you did use the word microwave.
They are microwave, they operate.
Point of order.
Different.
We have a motion and a second.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other comment from the public? Hearing no comment, back to the board.
We have a motion and a second.
Did I miss that part?
I don't remember.
So let's take a motion from the board if you'd like to move forward.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank
you, board members.
Okay, item number 392022. County Administrator pursuant to Government Code Section 25304, appoint Donna Hillegass as Yuba County Clerk-Recorder effective February 1, 2022 for the remainder of the term vacated by Terry Hansen effective December the 27th, 2021.
Yes, good morning, Chair, members of the board. Kevin Mallon, Yuba County Administrator. As the board is aware, we had an elected county official, Terry Hansen, who retired and vacated that elected position effective December 27th of last year. And as it would have it, there's a rule and a law for everything, right? And so we have a government code section that kind of outlines a process that the board can take to appoint someone for the remainder of that elected official's term. In this case, Ms. Hansen's term would end at the end of this year. Actually, it would be I think the first Monday of next year, essentially. But so we're in a situation where obviously there's a need to run the clerk recorder's office, and we have a deputy clerk recorder that has been in that capacity for a number of years and really been the right hand for Ms. Hansen, and I'm recommending that the board appoint that person to fill the remainder of her term, and that's Donna Hillegass. And Donna is in the audience today if the board has any questions for her.
Would Donna like to make any comments?
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Donna Hillegass. I'm the acting clerk recorder in the office today. I do come with, I have 17 years of experience in the office, and that's across all the functions of the office. Sometimes people forget that we do things besides elections. We handle, if you're ever in the building long enough, you'll see us marrying a couple out in the hallways. We issue vital records. We maintain records of land transactions to create a permanent record for the public. So we do play a large part of the public's life. And our office has done a good job. And I would really appreciate the opportunity to continue doing that good job and working with the excellent team that we have.
Comments from the board?
The chair,
Go ahead.
I'll just say, as someone who's volunteered as a poll worker and had the opportunity to work with Donna and her team, she's extremely competent, and I can't think of a better person to appoint to fulfill this role.
Through the chair, Donna, thank you very much for representing the county at that meeting in Hallwood. You did extremely well, and I look forward to working together with you for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Other than a quick comment, I think we're very fortunate to have you step up to this role in such a short notice, so thank you for doing that. Do I hear a motion from the board?
So moved.
I'll second.
I have a first and a second. Roll call, please. Is there any public comment? Thank you.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes,
Thank you. That's unanimous.
thanks.
Thank you.
Ordinance and public hearings.
If you challenge in court the action or decision of the Yuba County Board of Supervisors regarding a zoning, planning, land use, or environmental protection matter made at any hearing described in this notice, you may be limited to raising only those issues you or someone else raised at such hearing or in written correspondence delivered to the Yuba County Board of Supervisors at or prior to such hearing. Public comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual or group. Item 10-2022, Community Development and Services. Hold public hearing, waive reading, and adopt ordinance to repeal and reenact Title 11 Development Code and County Zoning Map, and determine project is exempt from California Environmental Quality Act, Section 15183.
Thank you for reading that. I'll open the public hearing as we move forward.
Through the chair, this is Kevin Perkins, Planning Manager with Yuba County CDSA. Let me pull up a PowerPoint that I've prepared for your board. Rochelle, do I need to share the screen as part of the Zoom? Through the chair, again, this is Kevin Perkins, Yuba County Planning. Before you today are some development code changes that my staff has proposed over the past year. Just a little background for your board. In 2015, your board adopted our development code, our current development code. At the time, in 2015, the last time we updated our development code was 1983, so it was extremely out of date. And so your board at that moment asked my staff to bring updates to your board annually to make sure that the document was more of a living document and it was up to date. And so that's a little bit of the background that we have on as why I'm here today and what we're presenting. For the most part, the changes that you guys are going to see before you are state law. The past 3 or 4 years, the state has passed so many housing related laws that it's been hard to track and maintain. Maintain in the sense of making sure that our development code is consistent with the state law. So there's a number of state mandated changes that we have, and then also there's some staff led changes. I'm going to go into both of them. I'm going to do kind of an overview of anything. So if there's anything specific that your board would like to discuss in more detail, please stop me or wait till the end of my presentation and I'll go over those in more detail. One thing that I do want to note, as we do with all proposed ordinances, we did have a hearing before our Planning Commission in November of 2021. At the Planning Commission meeting, we go into a lot more detail with the planning commissioners. We use them as a sounding board to make sure what we're proposing makes sense and go into a lot of detail on the proposed requests. At the Planning Commission meeting, the Planning Commission did recommend 4-0. There was one absent planning commissioner. They recommended that your board adopt the proposed changes. And so I do want to let you know ahead of time that we did have a hearing, a publicly noticed hearing with our Planning Commission. Okay, so I'm going to jump right into the state mandated changes. Again, these changes are state law already, and we're just adding them into our development code. The first one is a number of state laws related to ADUs, and ADUs are accessory dwelling units. They're effectively second dwelling units. So what we did previously, we had a section in our development code that discussed second dwellings, and we called second units second dwellings. And now we have language that's consistent with state law on allowing or naming them ADUs. And to sum it up to you guys really quickly, on any single family or in any zoning designation that allows single family residences as a permitted use, you're allowed to have one ADU by zoning right. And there's also some other provisions for multifamily housing as well. And so our development code's consistent with state law now. And the county does have a provision that if right now ADUs are limited to 1,200 square feet. The county does have a provision that we are recommending stay in our development code that allows a process if a homeowner wants to make an ADU larger than 1,200 square feet, they can go through an avenue use permit process. So we do have that still in our development code. Next, there's some laws around ag housing, which basically streamlines ag housing. So, any of our farming community that needs housing for farm workers, there are provisions, state law provisions that allow that in a more streamlined process. The next one I want to talk about is SB 35. It's a state law that basically streamlines affordable housing projects. So if a project has a certain level of affordability, they get a streamlined approval process of 60 or 90 days. The next couple of laws are related to California wanting to help solve the homeless issue that they have, and these laws are around emergency shelters and shelters in general. The first one, AB 139, eliminated a requirement that shelters need to be 300 feet away from each other. So now there's no distance requirement for emergency shelters. The next law, SB 48, created a term, a low barrier navigation center. A low barrier navigation center is effectively an emergency shelter that doesn't have, there are no limits, or there's no restrictions on who can go to those facilities. You can't deny someone access for any reason. And so it's a new term that we added to our development code that was created by state law, and we had to allow it into our residentially zoned properties. Another one, again, is supportive housing. We added a definition of what supportive housing was, and consistent with SB 2162, we allowed it by zoning right in our medium and high density residential zoning districts and commercial mixed use. So effectively any zoning designation that allows for high density residential or multifamily, we allow supportive housing. And effectively, so supportive housing would just be housing that the people who were living in the housing had supportive services going to those housing facilities. Next, we have some additions to our reasonable accommodation ordinance. SB 520 basically allows for reduced barriers for people with disabilities. So if someone needs a ramp in their front yard to get into their house, and that ramp effectively is, doesn't meet our setback standards, this law allows people to put those ramps in place and not have to go through the process of paying a few $1,000s for a variance. So it's definitely a needed requirement for people with disabilities. And lastly, there's an AB 2345, and what this did, it's a bonus density incentive program. The state has always had a bonus density program, and what that means is on a housing project, if you propose having affordable housing, if your density is 20 units per acre, you can get a higher density if you have affordable components to housing. And the state law that basically passed, AB 2035, created it where there's a max of, you can get up to a 50% density bonus depending on the level of affordable housing you're proposing. And you can get concessions, a developer can get concessions on their project. So if they need parking reductions or setback reduction, if they have a certain level of affordability on their project, they can get those. So those are the state mandated changes. I don't know if there's any questions you guys have right now, or if you just want me to jump ahead into the staff-based changes. All right, I'll move ahead to the staff-based changes. Excuse me. So effectively, the staff-based changes, on these, we've noticed over the last year a couple of areas that needed changing, that weren't consistent with previous approvals, or just didn't make sense in general on how we had things in our development code. The first one is last year your board created a process through our definition of farming to allow people to be able to put greenhouses or establish power on a property that is vacant. And in doing so, we forgot to add that to all the ag designations. And so we're seeking this year for you guys to add it to all ag designations so it's consistent with the rest of our development code. Also in our solar power section, we left out ag industrial as a approved zoning designation that could have on-site and off-site power consumption. And what that means is If, right now our ag industrial area or zoning designation has a lot of farming operations on it. And if those farmers wanted to have a solar system on their property to help pay off or help reduce the pump costs and their electricity costs, they could do so, where there's a little bit of inconsistency in our code that we want to clean up on that. Another area that we're seeking some change on is personal storage. And so personal storage right now is defined as like mini storage and or boat and RV storage. And in 2015, when we updated our development code, we were coming out of the housing crisis and we had a lot of available property. And we thought that, maybe having personal storage as an allowed use in the residential zoning designations could be a good idea given how much available residential land we had. Circa 2022, the state's passed a few laws making it more difficult to change residentially zoned property into other designations. And also we're concerned about an inherent conflict between residential properties and having mini storage and or boat and RV storage next to each other. So we're recommending that your board remove personal storage as an allowed use with a conditional use permit in the residential districts. There's a number of vacant commercial properties that does allow personal storage by zoning right and an easier process that we think is vacant commercially zoned properties that could accommodate that. Next, we realize that there's an allowed use in our rural commercial and our single family residential called neighborhood services. The development code didn't define what neighborhood services was, so we added a definition that effectively limits neighborhood services to stores that are 6,000 square feet in size and are engaged in selling small personal items or providing small personal services. Again, neighborhood services would be something that you'd see in a residential neighborhood on a corner that could have like a small little convenience store or maybe, a nail salon, hair salon, something like that. Another change that we're seeking your board to move forward with is, consistent with direction that we've received from your board in wanting commercial development to be easier for developers and a more streamlined process. We noticed that large format retail is required a conditional use permit in our commercial zoning designations. We don't think that's necessary. Our commercial zoning designations are large enough to handle large format retail, and we wanted to remove all barriers for economic development and businesses to go into the county. And lastly, in terms of staff-led changes on text, we have had a number, right now, truck parking for the trucking industry is considered under freight, truck, and terminal and warehousing, and that use is allowed in a couple of our industrial zoning designations. And over the past year, we've had a number of interested parties wanting to create truck stops in our industrial zoning designation. And we didn't really think through in 2015 all of the impacts that trucking would have in our industrial zoning designation in terms of screening, the impacts that the facilities would have on local roadways, and staff would like to require these truck terminal and warehousing facilities to have a minor conditional use permit that would allow for a public hearing and staff to dive deeper into the proposals to make sure that all potential effects of these truck parking and truck facilities are addressed through conditions of approval and a public hearing. So that goes through the proposed text that we have. We have proposed some changes to our zoning map in our community of West Linda, effectively between Feather River Boulevard and Pasado on Arboga Road. There are a number of properties that are currently zoned single-family residential, and there's a number of properties on Arboga Road that are zoned medium-density residential. And what over the past year, we've had a number of property owners along Arboga Avenue and a number of potential developers contact us and want to add more housing to their property. And my staff realized that there was an inconsistency between what actually is on the streets on Arboga Road in that section. It's more of a mixed, it's more of a medium density residential area. There's larger lots. These lots, you know, a number of them have multifamily residential uses already, and staff in receiving these requests, and you know, it wasn't one or two people, we actually received probably 5 to 8 people on that specific roadway. So we looked at it, and now we're proposing that your board change the zoning on a number of parcels from single family residential to multifamily residential. And this next slide will be you know, I apologize for how small it is. I don't know if I can zoom this in for people to be able to see it a little better. Okay, so if you're following my mouse right here, this is the section of Arboga Road that I'm referring to. Here's Passado, here's Feather River Boulevard. These areas that are highlighted in pink are the parcels that we're seeking to rezone from single family residential to medium density residential. What you don't see are these other sections along Arboga Road that are clear. Those sections are already zoned medium density residential. And, you know, consistent with state law and wanting to have more housing, we think this would be a worthwhile change to the section of roadway. Right now, there are a number of vacant lots that, you know, in the past that are anywhere from an acre to a third of an acre. And with single family residential zoning, you have a house in the front part of your property, and then you know, there's a large section that isn't being utilized. And historically, our code enforcement department has had issues with these larger parcels being used for, you know, cattle, horses, like, you know, bigger livestock, you know, junk, trash, and debris gets piled up in these areas. And, you know, we did have issues with cannabis on these larger parcels in the past. And I'm not saying that this proposed zone changes are going to solve any of that, but what it will do is allow more residential to be allowed on those properties and maybe give an alternative to something that might not have been the type of land use that we've want to see in that area. So that's kind of a brief overview of that. You know, just kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of the rest of the process before I answer any questions that you might have. Oops, let me back down. Okay, so all projects before your board land use wise are subject to the California Environmental Quality Act. In the case of these proposed development code changes, when our general plan was adopted in 2011, we prepared an environmental impact report, and there is a CEQA exemption that allows ordinances that are consistent with our general plan that was adopted, or the EIR that was adopted with our general plan, to move forward with the CEQA exemption. And we believe that the proposed changes before you are consistent with what is in our general plan and the EIR that was adopted with the general plan. And, you know, lastly, again, you know, staff's recommendation is to find the project exempt from CEQA pursuant to section 15183 and repeal and reenact Title 11 of our development code and amend our zoning map. I know that was a lot. I tried to go through it as quickly as I possibly could. So if you guys have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
I do. You had a mention of RV parking that is now going to change how that does. We had an issue with the gentleman who wanted to use RV parking. Has that been resolved?
So yes. So we're only changing this requirement in our single family, our multifamily, and our high density residential. The gentleman that you're referring to, his property is zoned residential estate. So this will not affect him or his proposal. He's in the process right now of getting his conditional use permit to a public hearing within the next month or two. And I actually have a meeting tomorrow to discuss that project further.
Excellent. And then earlier, you mentioned something called low barrier navigation. doing things that we do not approve of, we still have to provide housing, or are we telling people?
So this is the low barrier navigation centers are effectively like an emergency shelter. So this isn't something that it would be if a developer or an agency or a group wanted to create one of these low navigation barrier centers. It would be effectively like a center someone could go to, and as part of having decreased requirements on where they could be located, the state created requirements that you couldn't have, like entrance requirements. Like you can't require someone to do drug testing. You can't require them to, go to like any sort of religious service, or you can't deny them entrance because they have kids, dogs, things of that nature. And so it's a new land use type for emergency shelters. We haven't had anyone in the county propose one yet, but that's effectively what they are.
It doesn't apply to Ports Forward or any other.
No, this would be new moving forward.
I think, Andy, you're muted.
Seth, can you speak into the mic?
My apologies, I didn't flick the button.
Oh, works so much better for us deaf folks.
Any other questions from the board?
Well, I through the chair, I'd like to thank Kevin for his ability to answer questions from my constituents, and apparently you have to be continuously reviewing state mandates just to stay current. And our general plan was in 2011. I think the market has changed drastically since then, and you're trying to stay up with all the ambiguity that was in the original general plan, and straighten out the language. So thank you very much. And how many staff do you have to be able to do this? This looks like a full-time job for so many people.
Through the chair, I'm glad you asked, because it was something that I did want to speak. This really is a collaborative effort, as you if you guys saw with your staff report. I think the changes, are 500 pages total on everything, and so right now we're in a good spot with staff. We have 4 full-time planners. One has been assigned to helping me with doing the ordinance changes. I have another staff member that used to do that's providing some mentorship on that. But again, this has been a really a big group effort. County Counsel's office has helped quite a bit on this, and has worked with us on all of this, and also moving forward with having staff. We've met the internally, and we probably will have 8 or 9 new ordinances coming before your board in 2022. So with staff, now we're able to kind of catch up on some of the things we're behind in terms of making sure our ordinances are up to date. So I really want to thank your board for supporting the planning department in that manner.
Through the chair, would you please thank staff for all their hard work? I know they're terming the Sacramento the Puzzle Palace, somewhat similar to the Pentagon. But thank you very much for staying up with their idiosyncrasies.
Thank you.
So the public hearing was open. Do we have any comment from the public? Seeing no comment, I'll close the public hearing, bring it back to the board.
So moved.
Second.
I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vasquez,
Yes.
Supervisor Blazer,
Yes.
Supervisor Fuhrer,
Yes.
Supervisor Bradford,
Yes.
Supervisor Fletcher.
So before I vote, I will mention tremendous job, a lot of work. Seems to me this is very positive for the public. It allows more development if needed. It's just a lot of work you've put into this, but it's very positive. So yes.
Thank you. That's unanimous.
Thank you.
Very good. Correspondence. I think we have one letter from RCRC, which says we're going to be working harder on broadband. So our broadband director, pay close attention to that, and let's stay on top of broadband. Board and staff report, Andy.
urn in memory of the fallen Elk Grove officer, Tyler Lenahan, if you would do that for me. I think what I'm going to do is also work out to where we recognize the fallen officers across the states. It's getting to be a more common occurrence. It used to never be a big deal. Now it's become one. So with that, I'll close. You know, that's it.
And if the full board would like to sign on that, I'm sure that would be appropriate.
Yes, I'm sorry, forgot that. Everything that we do for fallen officers should be full board.
Very good. Don?
District 2. A few little updates from District 2. City's making pretty good progress. I think they've let the contract to improve Fifth Street. If you haven't noticed it, First Street has been completely overhauled, new overlay, diagonal parking, helped to slow down the traffic a little bit. The District 10 group, which is now part of District 2, they are still pushing Caltrans for some leeway. I don't know how far they're going to get. The ideal goal, of course, is a bypass or some way to direct the traffic out of Marysville, but they're also working to limit that improvement to 3 lanes instead of 5. They're trying to make some progress. On a smaller vision is the downtown. They are finally working on all the lighting downtown, so we'll see some improvements on the street lights. And I believe Salov still plans on coming in and painting all the light poles downtown. And we do have at least 2 or 3 new businesses down there too. So at this point, it looks fairly encouraging. Thanks.
Seth?
There were some motions on the consent calendar concerning the terrorism task force. I'd love to hear a report for what we were doing the grants on with that, if we could at some point in the future.
If I could, through the chair, and I'll just address it right now. It's one of those things when you receive federal grants, there's usually a checklist, a litany of things that are required as part of the grant. And so the terrorism task force is one of those things where, and that's typical in some of these emergency services focused federal grants. And the focus is really on making sure there's coordination between the county and other entities that would be involved in a response. And so the short answer is staff will ensure that that box is checked and that requirement is met as part of the grant requirement.
Is that adequate, or would you like a full report?
I'll talk to more afterwards, I guess. And then I wanted to thank Donna for her comments. I completely agree. It's a very large agenda, and I worry that sometimes not all our boxes get checked. Thank you.
Gary?
I wanted to close today in memory of Joe Henderson, who recently passed away. Joe's a former Wheatland City Council member and also served as mayor. So, and if the entire board would be willing to sign that, I would appreciate it.
I think that'd be great. Kevin?
Yes, just to make sure the board's aware, there's a reason why I'm wearing a facial covering, and I suggest or recommend when you're in our building. Since January 1, we've had over 100 county staff test positive. We have less than 800 staff total. So it's running like wildfire through the staff right now. We're doing our best to have that not adversely impact the services we provide to the public, obviously working closely with department heads as they're impacted. But essentially, per Cal OSHA, we're in outbreak protocol in multiple departments. We're having to do testing, and people are quarantined, and you can imagine. So behind the scenes, there's a lot of disruption going on due to the current COVID surge, but we're doing our best public facing that the public doesn't feel or impacted by that. So that's all I have.
Through the chair, can I address Mr. Mellon's response to the COVID? The death rate has gone down and the hospitalization count has gone down. And are we making changes accordingly in shutdowns so that we don't, throw out the baby with the bathwater?
Yes, to kind of follow up on my comment, I just want to make sure it's clear. So we are not changing how we do business with the public as part of this surge. We do have requirements with Cal OSHA that if a staff member tests positive, they have to be out of the workplace for so many days. And then there's a testing protocol if we want to pull them back in before the 10-day mandatory quarantine. So we're trying our best to follow the rules that are in place and not shut down or impact our services to the public.
So would that also be tied to Cal OSHA?
Yes, so we have to play by the rules, right? And so we're working within those rules the best we can to make sure we're not adversely impacting our services. Which is so that we're really in a much different state than we were in March of 2020.
We are. Rochelle. County Council.
Nothing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So just a quick comment on that, and I don't have a mask on. I don't know about anyone else, but the allergy season is upon us. If I put on a mask, I'm not sure anybody would have heard anything I had to say. But I don't disagree, and it's certainly open to discretion a bit, even though the rules are there for the board of which way they would like to go in that factor. But I can tell you, if I put on a mask, you're not going to hear me, and that's my concern. I'll just stay away from everyone. I would also like to close in memory of Jerry Lawrence from Brownsville, a longtime resident who did have a bad case of COVID and did not recover. So, hearing no other information, this meeting is adjourned.
Thank you all.
Recording stopped.
Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.